Welcome to Talk Maniac, where untold stories, unspoken truths, and the echoes of history come alive. Today we take you into the heart of one of the most devastating conflicts in modern history. It started as a whisper, a conflict in a small jungle nation, far from the eyes of the world, a murmur buried in the chaos of the Cold War. But soon, that whisper grew louder, becoming a scream that engulfed millions. This is the story of the Vietnam War, a war that tore apart nations, scarred generations, and left a legacy of pain and resilience. A war not fought in black and white, but in endless shades of blood, betrayal, and survival. Let's rewind to 1954, the year Vietnam's fate was sealed. After nearly 100 years of colonial rule, the French suffered a crushing defeat at Dien Bien Phu, ending their control over Vietnam. But freedom came at a price. The Geneva Accords split the nation in two. North Vietnam, led by Ho Chi Minh, envisioned a unified communist Vietnam. South Vietnam, under Ngo Dinh Diem, clung to Western ideals and relied heavily on U.S. support. For the United States, Vietnam wasn't just a country, it was a battlefield in the Cold War. American leaders feared the domino theory that if Vietnam fell to communism, all of Southeast Asia would follow. To them, Vietnam was the first domino that must not fall. But beneath this ideological battle, Vietnam was a nation fighting for freedom, from colonialism, foreign powers, and internal corruption. By the mid-1960s, the United States was fully committed to South Vietnam. But this wasn't a conventional war. The Viet Cong, a communist guerrilla force in the South, turned the dense jungles into a weapon. They ambushed, disappeared, and struck again, leaving American forces disoriented and vulnerable. In response, the U.S. unleashed destruction on an unprecedented scale. Operation Rolling Thunder saw 3 times more bombs dropped on Vietnam than were used in World War II. Entire villages were wiped off the map. Napalm, a weapon of fire, turned green jungles into burning wastelands. But instead of breaking the Vietnamese spirit, the destruction united them. For every bomb dropped, more people joined the fight. The jungle wasn't just their home, it was their greatest weapon. The land resisted, the people endured. To strip the Viet Cong of their jungle advantage, the U.S. resorted to chemical warfare. Over 20 million gallons of herbicides, including the deadly Agent Orange, were sprayed over Vietnam. The goal? To destroy the jungle and starve the enemy. But Agent Orange didn't just kill the jungle, it poisoned the soil, the water, and the people. Dioxin, a toxic chemical in Agent Orange, caused cancer, miscarriages, and birth defects in both Vietnamese civilians and American veterans. Even today, the legacy of Agent Orange lingers. Families are haunted by its effects, the land struggles to recover, and the cost of war is measured not just in lives lost, but in lives forever changed. War is a breeding ground for cruelty, and during the Vietnam War, countless women became silent victims of unimaginable suffering. Captured Vietnamese women, both civilians and suspected Viet Cong, were often tortured in pursuit of information. Electric shocks, beatings, waterboarding, and psychological manipulation were routine methods used to extract confessions or intelligence. But for many women, the horrors didn't stop at physical violence. Sexual abuse and humiliation were often used as weapons of war, breaking spirits and leaving scars that no time could heal. After that, many were forced into sex work, serving soldiers who viewed them as tools of comfort. These women weren't soldiers. Many were mothers, daughters, or farmers, caught between forces they couldn't control, yet they bore the brunt of a war that saw them not as humans, but as tools to exploit. Their voices were silenced, their suffering ignored, but their resilience and courage remind us of the strength to endure even in the face of inhumanity. Then there were the Amerasian children, mixed-race children abandoned by their American fathers. To the Vietnamese, they were children of the enemy. To America, they were forgotten. These children grew up ostracized, living reminders of a war their fathers left behind. Their survival was their resistance. Their stories deserve to be told. In war, morality is often the first casualty. On March 16, 1968, the village of My Lai became the site of one of the darkest moments in U.S. military history. American soldiers massacred over 500 unarmed civilians, men, women, and children. Some were tortured, others raped. None were spared. My Lai, 504 dead, a crime against humanity. My Lai wasn't an isolated event. It was a reflection of how war dehumanizes. It's a chapter in history that forces us to confront the horrors we are capable of. While Vietnam burned, America was on fire at home. The war divided the nation. Thousands protested in the streets, burning draft cards and demanding an end to the conflict. For those who served, the return home wasn't a hero's welcome. Soldiers were met with hostility, treated as symbols of a war many wanted to forget. Haunted by PTSD and trauma, many struggled to rebuild their lives. A nation divided, a generation broken. The war officially ended in 1975, but its consequences are still felt today. Millions of unexploded bombs remain buried in the land, claiming lives every year. Forests and farmlands still bear the scars of Agent Orange. For Vietnam, the war was a fight for freedom. For America, it was a war of fear. For the world, it was a lesson in the cost of arrogance and the fragility of humanity. This is the story of Vietnam. A war that taught us the true cost of conflict, the resilience of the human spirit, and the price of forgetting the lessons of history. At Talk Maniac, we tell the stories that matter. The stories that remind us who we are and who we must strive to be. Will we learn from this chapter of history, or will we once again write the future in blood?